very excited. Once again, you're welcome to the Startup Compliance series. This is very, very interesting session we always have. Very, very excited to always meet with lawyers, technology enthusiasts, startup enthusiasts, professionals from different walks of life. So I'm very, very excited to be having this session and this series. And I am your host, Rosemont Phil-Othihiwa. I'm a corporate commercial law attorney, and I am passionate about helping startups thrive amongst several competing regulatory concerns and shenanigans in the manner of speaking. So it's going to be a very interesting evening. We are currently on our eighth session and our eighth series. So I'm very, very excited that, we are really having a lot of traction with this. Thank you to everyone who has been a part of this through your comments. I see your messages in my DMs. I see your emails, and I really, really do appreciate them. So if you're joining us live, welcome once again. And if you're watching today, I also welcome you in the future, right? So thank you so much for being a part of this session. Today, we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic, and it's going to be talking about key compliance, cybersecurity compliance practices for startups. And I have a very, very interesting guest who is all the way from Kenya and will be speaking to us on things that technology firms, startups, businesses, legal practitioners, corporate practitioners, technology developers, software developers pay attention to when it comes to protecting the integrity of their work. So this very interesting conversation. My guest is already here, and I am excited that he's actually joining us all the way from Kenya. So if you're here, please put a comment in the comment section. Let us know where you're joining us from. Let us know what you're expecting. Let us know, just let us know what you're expecting to add today. So before I bring my guest, I'm going to be reading his profile, as you can see. So let me go back and bring him on board. Hi, Jasper. How are we doing? Good evening, wherever. It's good to have you.
Hi, Rosemont. It's a good evening to you too.
Can you hear me?
It's wonderful to be here and I'm excited.
Oh, yeah, indeed it is. And I'm very excited. Thank you for choosing to be a part of this session. So before we start, I love to definitely give honor to you. So I'll be reading your profile. So Jasper, I don't, and I actually tried not to strangulate my tongue when it came to pronouncing your surname, but Jasper Micieka, if I'm correct, is an
Yes,
advocate of
certainly.
the
You
High
are correct.
Court of Kenya, and as a technology lawyer, he advises SaaS businesses on contract negotiations, data security, privacy, compliance, consumer University of Nairobi, amongst other certificates and professional qualifications in law and technology. So if you're here, please, I want you to welcome my guest. Thank you very much, Jasper, for being a part of this interesting session. I remember when, and it was really good that you're here. So thank you very much. We have Ayobami Ishmael, who is joining from the UK. You're welcome. It's good to have you. Thank you very much. And we have Garvey, who is joining also so we actually have a lot of people joining in aspects of you for being here. So let's go straight to it. So Jasper, tell me about yourself. How did you venture? I'm very excited about that into security space, and how has that journey really been from you? Yes, you're welcome, Victor. I see Victor coming in all the way from Ireland. You're welcome, and Joel, welcome. Connect with someone. Let's have a good time. So I will definitely love to hear your story, your journey, because I know you are a lawyer and I know you in the technology space. So I journey has been for you, and we can of course move to other parts of the conversation.
Rosman, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really happy to share about my experiences and my journey throughout cybersecurity. So, as Rosemond introduced me earlier, my name is Jasper Micieka. As you pronounced my surname, you mentioned it correctly, so thank you for that. People will tend to butcher it quite a bit. So, yes, my name is Jasper Micieka. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and I am a technology lawyer. My journey coming into law is actually people would describe it as a strange one, because I would say that I am a techie at heart. I'm more of a technology person who actually ended up doing practicing law. So my journey really begins from way back when I was in high school. I learned software development, and I did that for a couple of years. I actually had a gig as a junior developer at a web agency in Kenya. I did that for a while. Then I decided to switch into cybersecurity because it merges my two passions: technology and the law, which I'm actually trained in and qualified in. So today, my work usually tends to revolve around privacy by design in technology products, dealing with cyber incidents and breaches. I also review contracts and I manage compliance activities. I usually work with SaaS companies, software as a service companies, mainly in healthcare, and gaming, and I also advise other small and medium enterprises. So today's webinar, I'm not sure if I may proceed with that, Rosemond.
So I think it's a good background you have, because a lot of lawyers are deemed to not be technology or math geeks, because we have this mindset that you can't. But it's good that you really had this background as far back as high school, so that's really really good. So before you start, right, my follow-up question to that is, how has it been working? Because of course, for those that don't know, SaaS is of course service as a software. So for how has it been working in that space? Right. I don't want you to go too granular, but in terms of your experience, what are the things that you've encountered working in that space as a technology lawyer and working with that kind of startup that's actually in that area? It would be great, how that journey has been for you in a minute.
Well, working in SaaS has been really interesting and exciting in some sense, because you're sitting in the middle of, you could say, two opposite worlds. Technology advances really fast. They're always trying to innovate, create new products, new things, and launch them fast in the market. Then on the other side is lawyers, and lawyers are usually seen by guys in the technology scene as the people who tell you what not to do, or don't do this, or don't try this, or just stay away from this. So what I've basically tried to do is merge the two worlds by speaking to technology guys in a language that they understand and help explain how regulation and how compliance works for them in a simplified way.
So that takes me to my first question, right? We all know the purpose of this webinar is to educate startup founders on key regulations and compliance, things for startups, basically. So I would love you to give us an overview. What is cybersecurity, right? And there's this thing about people confusing maybe privacy or cyber privacy or data privacy with cybersecurity. Is there a difference? Are they the same? Yes or no? And if they are, what are they? So it'd be great for you to walk us through that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Cybersecurity and privacy are quite interrelated, though you should view privacy as one part of cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is a whole broad thing. Because in an increasingly connected world, cybersecurity is simply, I think it's the security of everything currently. Because from infrastructure such as maybe dams, electrical equipment, medical equipment, through the educational sector, government, I think most of the things that we interact with, most of the activities that we engage in our lives currently, they're managed through cloud computing and through technological platforms. So securing the data that is there is really important. And cybersecurity usually involves protecting and defending information systems from damage, unauthorized use, and modifications. So when you really think about cybersecurity, you should think of three things. We call them in cybersecurity, we call them the CIA triad. There is confidentiality, there is integrity, and we have availability. Confidentiality usually deals with protecting the data that needs protection and preventing access to unauthorized individuals, such as hackers or maybe disgruntled employees or something of the sort. In integrity, we are mainly focused on ensuring the data has not been altered in any unauthorized manner. And in availability, we are focused on ensuring that the data is accessible to the authorized users when and where it is needed and in the format that it is required in. So now, cybersecurity and privacy. Cybersecurity, you could say that it protects all the data, while data protection and privacy is focused on the personally identifiable information, and it's usually centered on a human rights basis, and there are laws that are specific on the personal information that is restricted. So privacy legally restricts organizations and governments and their ability to collect, use, and disclose personal information. One way of differentiating privacy and cybersecurity, you could actually look at it from a company's perspective and an individual's perspective. For instance, a company may have its own data, while an individual may have their own financial data. While cybersecurity covers the protection of all these forms of data, privacy covers only the individual's private data. I think that captures it.
It's interesting. So that means that, it privacy or data privacy is just a subset, right, of cybersecurity,
Yes.
because when you're dealing with data privacy, it's more individualized. So you're basically dealing with the rights of data subjects, as they are called, and everything that is attendant to that process. But when you're talking about cybersecurity, you're talking about everything from your management information systems to the internal
Yes.
structure of your software, however it is you are deploying or releasing information, and of course the integration between those parts. So I think that's interesting, and I love the abbreviation CIA. Can you remind us what it means again? So I know. I please remind me what that acronym is, and I hope that's not the meaning of the real CIA that we know. I'm just joking, but what's the depth? What's that? What does that mean again for somebody who maybe didn't catch that?
Okay. So the CIA, we call it the CIA triad. It's three things: confidentiality,
Mm,
integrity,
mm,
and availability. So about confidentiality, it's about
okay,
protecting the data that needs protection and preventing unauthorized access. And then integrity, it's
okay.
ensuring that the data has not been altered in in an unauthorized manner. And that usually involves measures like cryptography and things like that to ensure that maybe when the data is being sent or when the data is being stored, that it is not altered in any way other than by the
Mm,
authorized personnel. And then we have the availability, the third one and the last one. And this one is only focused on ensuring that only the people who have authorized access can view the data and that it is in the format that it is required in. It ensures that the data is accessible to authorized users when and where it is needed, and the form and the format that it is required in.
oh wow. Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. And I know that for those of you listening, it sounds like a lot of technical stuff, but trust me, I think it's very honestly, and I think conversations like this are really good to really identify what the difference is, because I know a lot of people could actually mismatch or actually try to identify both as the same. So I want to ask a little practical question, right? In the course of your work,
Mhm.
how do you how should a startup, now this is a little practical question, for someone who doesn't even understand the importance of this, what are some of the key areas in different startups that, as a cybersecurity conscious person, you should start thinking about? Is it the protection of your software? What exactly are the technical things that, a startup founder listening in right now needs to start paying attention to before we move to the laws and regulations that will govern the space?
Firstly, I'll start by saying that startups usually they do not exist in isolation. They have clients, they collect their data, and anytime you collect users' data, you need to protect it. And also, there's your own data, which usually acts as a competitive advantage. Let's say you have your software or you have the code, and you need to enact measures to protect yourself as a business, to protect your staff, and to protect your customers. And it is also important to understand that in cybersecurity, there are two main things that we're focused on protecting. We're focused on protecting human lives and the human welfare, and number two, we're focused on protecting assets, whether it's your organization or any other people that are related to you. So, and then another thing that you really need to think about as a startup founder is what sector you're in, because in different sectors, let's say you're in finance, maybe you're doing healthcare related business, there are different regulations or there are different requirements that are expected in compliance with cybersecurity.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to ask so please, everyone in the comments, it's good to also have your comments as well. You can share your thoughts with us, and it'd be really great to get. So let's go to regulations, right? So I am in Nigeria, and
Yeah.
one of the things that have happened now is that we currently have signed into law, or we are in the process of signing into law, our own data protection act. We have a cybersecurity law 2015 that governs different aspects of protection of the intellectual property and data and software and all that. We actually have a landscape where we are trying as much as possible to put these legislations together. So I wanted to walk us through from international laws to local national laws to sectoral laws on this on cybersecurity, right? What are they? Where can we find them? And how do they impact? What are some of them? And in case maybe we need to go back and do some research, can you point us to them and their impact, of course, on the business environment, or their impact on startup companies and organizations?
Yes, certainly. The thing about cybersecurity, it's usually quite sector specific. And first, I'll start with the international because we're in Africa. I'm in Kenya, you are in Nigeria. There's the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, aka the Malabo Convention. Maybe you guys can go and check it out later. Then in Nigeria, I noticed that there's the Cyber Crimes Act. You can also correct me if I'm wrong. There's the NDPR, which guides data protection. Then also you guys have an open banking policy with some cybersecurity aspects of the fintech industry. And you also have a national data strategy, which affects innovation and other things, and other regulations that may come up in Nigeria. In Kenya, we have quite a number of these laws. We have the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, which provides for cybercrime offenses. We also have the Kenya Information and Communications Act, it guides e-commerce and similar activities. Then we have the Data Protection Act, and we have the Cybersecurity for Payment Service Providers. And I think Nigeria has a similar thing on payment service providers. So I'll mainly focus on the sector-specific guidelines. For instance, in the banking and fintech sector, there is banking law that specifies the data handling and the security requirements. And the banking healthcare laws, they tend to apply data security requirements. And I would recommend that you check what laws are applicable to your sector in detail. But generally speaking, from a compliance perspective, and especially when it comes to cybersecurity and data protection, it is preferable to apply more stringent policies and basically adopt international standards or as I said, the more stringent requirements. Because in general, when these laws, they tend to come back to us in Africa, let's say things like the GDPR, they were enacted a couple years ago, but now we're seeing them like they're being slowly adopted, or some sections of them, or some sections of them are being brought into our local laws. So if you are in compliance with these requirements, let's say 5 years ago, it becomes very easy to manage your compliance activities currently. So when I mentioned the sector-specific guidelines, there's things like the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, which requires the financial institutions to adopt specific security safeguards for customers and public information. Then we have the PCI DSS, which is the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. This contractually imposes data security safeguards for companies that handle credit and debit card information. And I think this is really useful for the Nigerian startup industry, where I'm seeing there's a lot more fintech innovation compared to our side in Kenya, which maybe focuses on a bit more of other SaaS things. Then there's also, for healthcare startups, there's also the Healthcare Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which is also known as the HIPAA. And this mostly focuses on doctors, health insurance, and other healthcare companies and startups. And it provides for the stringent data security requirements. Then there's also the NIST 2014 Cybersecurity Framework, and there's MiFID for fintechs. But when you look at all these laws, whether it's the international law, whether it's the local or national laws, and this other sector-specific laws or industry standards, you see that they usually focus on, they generally have three purposes. And number one, I'd say that they promote innovation, because when there is a defined regulatory environment, it usually provides more safety for investors, especially institutional investors like private equity and other guys like venture capital. And then they also provide for consumer protection measures, for instance, the privacy for personal data. And thirdly, they combat and prevent illegal activities through cybercrime. Yeah.
Wow, that was a whole lot of legislations that you pulled out in just a minute. So the truth is, right, I'm wearing two hats. In my head, I'm thinking as a compliance professional, and in another part, I'm thinking of myself as a startup founder who maybe in Kenya in different aspects, right? It's good that you've mentioned some international regulations that insist that these key standards are upheld, right? You even made mention of the GDPR that is now finding its way here in Nigeria. Here we have the NDPR, and of course you have the Nigerian Data Protection Bureau, which has a set of regulatory guidelines as regards how startups should even practically implement. So if there's one thing I've gotten from what you've said here is that, yes, there's the international law, there's the national domestic, and then there's sectoral. So as much as there's a general, if you're in healthcare, a fintech sector specific legislation may not apply to you. So I think for that startup founder who is listening, it's important to know your industry, right? If you are providing any form of financial service, just know that there are some general laws that are applicable to you, whereas there are some very sector specific ones that you should know. So that's my comment, or in response to that, from a startup point of view. So as a compliance professional, I wanted to share with us some practical experiences that you've had when it comes to implementing these laws, because right now you actually do this for SaaS companies, right? So what are some of the things you've engaged in when it comes to complying with these regulators? And as a compliance professional in a startup, right, how do you catch up, or how do you keep updated with these constantly changing laws? Because they change, right? Some don't regularly. So I would love you to answer in that aspect, and then also counsel a startup founder that's watching this and that's like, oh my God, wow, I never really thought about cybersecurity. Where do I start from? So it'd be great to have your thoughts on that.
That's quite. Thank you for that question. It's a really good question. I'd say when it comes to, let's say, looking for information about privacy and cybersecurity, I'll give you probably, if you're looking for privacy information, you'll start with OneTrust. They have this wonderful platform. It's called, just a second. Okay, OneTrust usually provides a paid service where you can get all the sector-specific or the national laws depending on your country or the sector that you're dealing in. But another really nice way of how I usually keep up with these things, let's say there's cybersecurity incidents or breaches, other things that maybe may not be reported in the media, I'd say start with Google Trends. Like you can create a custom search, for instance, cybersecurity breach or privacy incident or something like that. And you can get regular emails depending on the frequency that you want. Let's say the Google will update you daily, weekly, hourly, depending on what exactly you want. So there's that. Another really interesting place where I have learned quite a bit is Twitter, because there's some incidents that, let's say for the cybersecurity community or cybersecurity Twitter, if you may, there are some incidents that really are not reported in the mainstream media and stuff, but you realize that there's quite a bit of new information about maybe new attacks or new breaches that you really were not aware about, and you gain quite a bit of information from those sources. I feel like there's something I haven't answered. Could you kindly repeat?
Yes. So you've shared with us how that startup founder that's like, oh my God, there are so many regulations. Where do we start from? So you've answered the aspect of how you can get updated with those industry specific compliance guides, right, or laws. So now I'm speaking as a compliance professional. What are some of the experiences you've had practically? At least the ones you can share, because of course. And then what are some of the things, some of the ways you've been able to handle some of those challenges from a compliance point of view? So that was my first question. Yeah.
Yes, I have had some interesting experiences. I don't think I'm at liberty to share everything, but I'll cover the meat. I'll cover it. I'll just give you the gist of it. I tend to deal with quite a lot of incidents, and let me see. Just a second as I recollect my thoughts.
Sure, you're
So
trying
yeah,
to find out how you're going to say it without saying it. So you can be very general. You don't have to give names. You don't have to give specifics, but you can just share with us.
okay, wonderful. I'll share maybe there's several instances. As I said, I mainly deal. I wouldn't say mainly, but I deal with quite a number of incidents and breaches. And I'll give you an interesting one. In February, we there's one of the companies that I work with, and there was an incident where we discovered that maybe there is the user database. Then we discovered that during the span of a weekend, the number of registered users increased quite a bit. So like let's say you have like a couple thousand registered users, then all of a sudden now you have like 100,000, and then you wonder, where's the spike? Then you look at the other metrics, maybe the revenues haven't really grown up, they haven't grown or anything of the sort. So you start following up the database, and then you find that there's somebody who's trying to inject some new user data through um, from some IP address somewhere in Eastern Europe, and that goes on, and then then we had to manage the incident by we had to take the server offline and clean through the database and do that kind of thing. Then we had to document everything and try then we had to report the incident to the authorities and all that stuff. That's just one of the incidents. There's also an incident where I work with another gaming company, and I'm really struggling because I'm dealing with some sensitive data here.
You don't even have to mention the just say this happened, that happened, and that's it. But like I said, I know it's very specific, and because you're even dealing in a technology driven space, but I think that example works for us. Don't worry. Let's not put you on the spot because it's really a lot.
Okay.
So I think what is very pretty clear is protection. And one of the things you kept hammering on is the information of people in your database, right? You need to secure that. And
Yep.
for somebody who, you're a legal practitioner, you have a technology background, you've been able to identify key, gaps. So there are some things that normally you should be able to implement. If you are you are building your software on a cloud, you're putting the data of your customers. So let me give a typical example. I was having a conversation with excuse me, a privacy protection officer who is in Singapore, and he said something. He said they are so strict when it comes to the integrity of data. Remember, you talked about confidentiality, integrity, right? And
Yep.
what they usually say is if you're trying to implement a data privacy report, and in some of your reports they ask you, where do you store A? And you say, we store A on the cloud. Their officers will ask you, where is the cloud? Can you touch the cloud? Can you see the cloud? You need to assure us that what you are putting there has been safe. So it's not just something that just speak about. You have to be very, very sure and certain that nobody can just wake up and have access to that. So it just goes to show that there's a lot to think about. If you look at some of the major things, so I'll give a typical example, and this is common knowledge, right? Remember, I don't know if you watched that Netflix series, the Crash of the Crypto King. I can't remember the title, but there was Crypto King there, where there was like a crypto exchange, right? And in that exchange, apparently, when the owner of the exchange, or the founder of that exchange, passed on, in quotes, because it was alleged that he had lost his life. He had gone with the passwords with the I'm laughing because it's really serious, right? And they couldn't, people whose monies were there, they didn't have access to it, and it's so serious now, right? So you need to really ensure that you're not just in the process of dealing with data, you are actually taking steps to ensure that there's a lot of things, and we are going to go to that because I know you'll be sharing with us very practical steps on how startup founders can actually address these issues. So let's go to that, since we are actually talking about threats and impacts on businesses. What are some of the common attacks that usually happen to these startup businesses that are not protected or do not have an idea? Can you explain to us some novel incidents, maybe ransomware, session token spoofing? What does all that mean to somebody who doesn't even know what they are? Phishing emails. What are some of the things that we should be wary about as business owners, and look at when it comes to securing the integrity of your data, and of course your software or your platform or your database? Yeah. So share with us. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. In cybersecurity, you'll see that the incidents and breaches are usually caused by the attacks are usually focused on two types. You'd say you can put them into two groups. There's actually the technical means, and then there's social engineering. Because at the end of the day, it's always easier to hack a company or gain unauthorized access into a company by influencing somebody or pretending to be somebody you're not, and having them to give you access into their systems. So I'll review a couple of these attacks. Sorry, let me put my thoughts in order. I'll share a couple of these threats and their impacts on businesses. I've also put them into two kinds of categories. There's the novel attacks, and then there's the novel attacks are the new ones that really are making waves in the industry right now. And then there's the usual things that you've probably heard of before. So the first one is cross-site scripting, or XSS. This one, it's an internet crime where the hacker usually injects malicious code into our website. And then the code is usually designed to steal our website visitors' data. For instance, they steal usernames and passwords. One example recently it involved British Airways, which faced a data breach, and it affected around 380,000 of their transactions in their booking systems. And then this put thousands of customers' sensitive data at risk. Then there's the denial of service cyber attacks. And this one's designed to make our website or other online service unavailable or unusable to other users. So maybe sometimes you might find maybe it's your competition, or maybe somebody who just wants to put your service out of business for whatever other reason. And then this one is usually accomplished through flooding our website with requests, and then this causes it to slow down or crash. Examples usually involve a person using a computer and then using that computer to create maybe a botnet service, which is a network of other chained computers. And then they'll send lots and lots of service requests to your servers, and then when they're unable to deal with all the servers, they'll be overloaded and they will go down. Then another one is if eavesdropping attacks, and then this usually involves secretly monitoring another person's online activities. These cyber attacks, they usually occur through use of trojans or spyware, and these ones they used to intercept a person's online communications through use of keyloggers or other similar spyware methods. This usually happens mostly on maybe they can attack, they can apply, they can engage this attack through your personal computers. They can be targeted. Let's say somebody can send you an email file. Somebody can email you a file, a PDF or something. Then once you open it, the attack will begin and it will establish itself on you. It will lodge itself on your system. Let's say the Trojan or whatever. And then it can capture it can capture your passwords. It just looks in and sees everything that you do. Another one is what I mentioned earlier, the insider attacks. And this one is a form of cybercrime where the employees, they use their access to to a company's computer system and other resources to damage or steal from the company. Then there's the one that we all know, phishing. Now, this is a form of cybercrime where someone uses the internet to try and trick somebody else into giving them their login information. For instance, people use fake websites or emails. I wish I could demonstrate this practically, but probably not today. Now, then there's the novel threats that are really making waves in the cybersecurity industry right now. There's ransomware. I think ransomware is quite popular and it has affected quite a number of people. Now, this is a form of malware that encrypts a computer or its files, and then it usually demands a payment in exchange for the computer or the files to be decrypted. It is usually used to hold a computer or a file hostage until the victim pays a ransom. I'll give you a funny example. This actually happened recently. Actually, I think there's two of them that have happened recently in Kenya by itself. Around last week, there's a chain of supermarkets. There's a big retailer called Livos. Their data was held hostage, but luckily it didn't involve any payments or things of the sorts. And then there's another one. This one is even funnier. There's the Kenya Airports Authority that are in charge of all the airport infrastructure in Kenya. So somebody decided to get all their data and then they encrypted it so the management couldn't access anything or anything of the sort. And they had to pay to access all their past data. Now there's some token spoofing. This one, it's really interesting and it's a really new thing. I only became aware of it last month. I'm not sure how long it's been around, but now session token spoofing. Basically, it's an attack that bypasses the security controls like passwords or multi-factor protections. For instance, you can get a text alongside once you've keyed in your password. And it does this by targeting the session tokens. And the session tokens are basically the cookies that usually keep you logged into a website, something like YouTube or your banking website or something of the sort, or your email. So now, session token spoofing, it usually effectively gives the attackers an exact copy of your browser. And this allows them to cause harm without needing to enter passwords or credentials. I think the best example of this happening recently is what happened there's a big YouTube channel called Linus Tech Tips. Usually covers mostly technology or things like that. They're technical-minded people in the audience, perhaps you may know it. Now, what happened was this guy woke up at around 3 a.m. and he basically received an alert that the attackers changed the name of his website, and they also started live streaming some crypto scam videos, and then they also deleted some videos. Now, Linus tried to change passwords. He tried to do the multi-factor thing. He tried to log out of his systems, log in again. But what he discovered was because the guys were actually they were logged in, whether he tried to log them out or whatever. What he discovered was this guy still had access, whether he changed passwords or whatever. And what actually caused this was they were doing some contract or something of the sort with some other guys. And in the course of some confusion there, one of the employees received a PDF with a quotation or something like that. And the attack basically started from the email that they received and the PDF file that they opened. So that is another example of the new things that actually happen in the industry right now. And the last, probably the most, is business email compromise. I think you know this one from guys like Hush Puppy and the kind of things that they were doing. So now this one, BEC, or business email compromise, it's a form of cybercrime where the scammer uses an email to trick somebody into sending money or divulging the confidential company information. The culprit usually poses as a trusted figure. Then they'll ask for a fake bill to be paid, or they'll ask for sensitive data, which they can use for another scam. And this form of scam is actually taking hold of it's actually appearing more and more because of the rise in increased remote work. Just a second, just a second. I was saying
Wow, this is a whole.
due to the rise in remote work, you'll find that you cannot physically walk to your boss's office and ask them, did you actually sign this? Did you actually request this payout or something of the sort, or did you approve of this bank transaction? But now because of the increased remote work, basically depend on emails. And in BEC, there's instances where you can send a false invoice. The scammer will email a fake bill, usually resembling a real one. They'll try and use a template or something of the sort. Then the only thing that may be off is the account number by 1 digit or something of the sort. And then they'll ask you to pay to a different bank. Then they'll pretend that maybe because of some compliance needs or something that your bank is being audited, so we cannot use that one for the transaction at the moment. Another way people usually do this is they pretend to be the CEO, and then they'll scam or spoof or hack into the CEO's email account, and then they'll email employees instructions to make a purchase or send money via wire transfer. That, as I said earlier, because of remote work, you cannot really walk into your boss's office or ask them, did you actually approve this or not? Then the scammer might ask the employee to purchase gift cards or something, and then they'll request the photos of the serial numbers, and that is how they cash out. Another really funny one is the lawyer impersonation. Now, in this scam, the attackers, they usually gain unauthorized access to an email account at a law firm. And then they'll start billing clients. They'll email clients an invoice or a link to pay online. And then the email address is usually legitimate. Everything checks out. When you do a quick glance on it, you'll think, I'm actually dealing with the right and proper channels. So the email address is usually legitimate, but you'll find that the bank account is not. Then another one, account compromise. The scammers will usually use phishing or malware to get access to the finance. They usually target the finance department in particular. So they'll try and get access to a finance employee's email account. For instance, an accounts receivable or maybe the financial controller or something of the sort. Then the scammer will email the company's suppliers with fake invoices that request payment to a fraudulent bank account. And this particular one is what Hushpuppy did. So I think those are the kind of attacks that startups usually face, and the new things that are happening in the scene right now.
Sorry, someone says I'm muted. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. Yes, sorry.
Great to hear
So
you.
I was saying that in a long breath, you literally explained a lot of things that happen in this space where you are trying to pretend to be someone you are not, so that you can gain access to somewhere you shouldn't. You've mentioned phishing, you've mentioned spooling, you've mentioned malware attacks. Okay, yes. Somebody says they can. Can you hear me now, please? Can anyone hear me? Thank you, Marvelous. Thank you, Joel. Thank
Yeah, I
you,
can hear
Henry.
you.
Can you confirm? Yeah, so I think I'm unmuted now. Sorry about that, everyone. So it shows you are following, and I love that. Thank you so much. So you've mentioned a lot, right? And so many of us have experienced that, especially when you are maybe on Facebook, somebody reaches out to you and says, can you give me some money? And then, because this is somebody that maybe you send the money, and then the person you said, you now realize that no, I'm not the one. My account was hacked and all that. So thank you for actually distilling this several times. And I think for everyone on this call, it's important to go back and really check, because as businesses, it's important because you can lose a lot of money by just failing to secure and even indoctrinate your staff as well as your employers of some of these realities, right? Because it's not just about knowing what they are. You need to train your staff and you need to put strict compliance guidelines. And I think that's in my next question. But we have a lot of comments in the comment section, and I love the engagement. So let's go to some questions because we are very close to finishing up. We have a question from Carl Ken Onura, and he says, from your experience, would you say venture capitalists, VCs, or other funders give enough importance to ensuring the ventures they fund are fully compliant with their respective industry cybersec regulations? This is a very fantastic question, and I definitely would love to have your thoughts on this question. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, Ken, thank you for that question. It's really, really important. From my experience, what usually happens is VCs are usually focused on the product and ensuring that it's fast to market. An example of what you can look at, a really good example that you can look at is Uber. Uber really focused on pushing the product to market fast and then worry about regulation later. So that is one of the concerns that I really deal with as a lawyer. It's usually basically putting out fires once people have already made a mess of things. And so guys usually focus on pushing the product to market fast and then deal about compliance later, rather than doing the opposite, rather than consulting their lawyers or other advisors that they may have on board. Osman, you're muted.
One of the things that VCs have to really think about is actually insisting that the integrity of the data they are dealing with is actually constantly being checked, right? In fact, I think investors really need to make it a milestone or a key performance indicator for startups to be able to assure, their funders, whether it's an angel investor, is a private equity investor, or a venture capitalist, to ensure that you are taking key steps to protect the integrity of the data you are dealing with. And I think I have been privileged to sit on those conversations, and I have seen where investors insist that if you do not have this framework in place, we will not give you money. And I think it's one of the ways we can insist and ensure that those things are done. So from experience, I would say a lot of VCs are more targeted towards go-to-market profits. But right now, as we're beginning to see in the ecosystem, there's a lot of what's the word? Sad stories going on. I think investors now are paying attention now to ensuring that compliance and the corporate governance when it comes to risk, technology risk or cybersecurity risk is dealt with. So thank you. We have a question from Joel. He says, could you repeat the name of the attack on Linus Tech? So I think he wanted to, because you shared the story, maybe you could give some insight on that. The name of the attack. I think you were referring to that.
The name of the attack, it's called Session Token Spoofing Attack. Session Token, TOKEN, Spoofing, SPOOFING, Spoofing Attack.
Okay. So okay? I think that was what you were referring to, where you talk about cookies, right? Where you already have saved cookies and then there's a breach on that using already registered, if I'm correct. Okay, I'm learning. So yeah, thank you. So thank you. Uche is here. Hi, Uche. So Uche asked this question. He says, what are some of the potential legal and regulatory developments in the area of AI security that companies should be aware of? This is a very big one. And I remember mentioning this during our session, about 2 sessions of, our 5th session on this series where we're talking about data privacy and the fact that AI has literally overhauled what we understand as regards due process. Now, you can just literally do almost anything. Images are generated automatically, text are generated automatically, So do we have any regulatory development that have factored the fact that AI is really now becoming a very huge thing. We all know ChatGPT. You already know platforms and software and AI technology that generates images. There is deep fake, right? Where literally you can have a conversation with somebody's face, thinking that you are the person, but you are not. It's just get the facial features of someone else. I literally stumbled on a YouTube channel that shows Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves is the actor, but it's not Keanu Reeves that is acting, but it's exact face. He's doing so many things. He's playing basketball. He's riding a bike. He's doing coffee. He's doing so much, but he's not the one. Like the channel will specifically tell you that this is a deep fake version of Keanu Reeves. Whatever you see on this channel is not being done by him. They literally had to do that. How do you draw the line, right? As in terms of regulations, how do you draw the line when it comes to AI security, and what should companies actually be aware of in this space? And I think it's a very fantastic question. Thank you, Uche, for that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. One thing about AI, it's moving really, really fast. For instance, ChatGPT was launched in November 28th, and then suddenly you can see all the kinds of things that people are creating around. But sadly, the thing about regulations is they move really slowly, in contrast to AI. For instance, AI in cybersecurity, it's about to cause some serious, serious headaches. There's something called, somebody created some new script or something of the sort called AutoGPT, where you basically create, the prompt. You give it the instructions of what you want to do. Let's say I want to hack StreamYard or I want to hack YouTube or something. So initially it'll create a script. Then through AutoGPT, it actually improves the code by itself. It actually tries out the attacks by itself and makes the improvements by itself. So that will create some serious, serious problems from a security standpoint going into the future. As of the moment, I think it will be a fair assessment to say that I doubt there's any regulator who really knows the future of AI or where things are going, such that they can make policies or other things to regulate where things are going at the moment.
Hmm. Wow. So that means that there seems to be a dearth of regulations that are trying to catch up with that. And I think, fast moving or fast paced economies need to start thinking of how important it is. Recent news offshore we all know in Italy, they literally banned Chat GPT from being used. You actually have universities across board. I currently have a university that I work for, where there literally is a software now that is being designed to be able to mark and identify project proposals, writings that are generated by ChatGPT, right? It's a ChatGPT spotter. I don't know the name, but a lot of software. So you have people building to identify. You have people who are building to match what it's trying to do, and then you have regulators that are saying, no, we don't agree with this and all that. My opinion, right, as far as regulations are concerned, like you said, regulators are very slow when it comes to catching up with technologically driven developments. And I think that any right thinking economy or government should begin to look at the future. In Nigeria here, right now, we already have a data protection bill that's currently at the final stages of legislative reading before the National Assembly of Nigeria. And, you have those innovations, but you can realize that even the period of time to pass a legislation, by the time you've passed the legislation, something else has happened that has affected the space. So I think for us as startup founders or as legal practitioners, keep being updated with the trends in the industry, right? And have a bulwark to be able to safeguard against these incident breaches. Because at the end of the day, even if there is no law that maybe penalizes or puts jail terms for the perpetrators of those crimes, you can actually ensure that you are indoctrinating your members, your team, your startup founders with some of the realities, some of the things they should expect. So Jasper has shared with us about close to 10 kinds of cybersecurity attacks that you can face as an organization. It'll be important for you to go back and look at all these breach types and identify what are some of the measures that you as an organization can already put in place to safeguard against this from your own point of view. Because if you keep waiting for the laws, well, you may wait a long time. So while we're trying to also, another thing we can do, in my opinion, is to push for policy advocacy. So, in your groups as lawyers, as professionals, we get to our sections and, we have meetings with stakeholders in the space. I don't know what's your own ecosystem in Kenya, but for us, we have the Nigerian, the NITDA, right? The Office for Technology Development. We have the NOTAP. We have a startup act now that has been signed into law, and we are trying to engage with different governments. We actually, we already have the act signed, and we are pushing towards state adoption. So one of the things that we try to do as lawyers in our space is that we're trying to engage with these policy makers, go for stakeholder town hall meetings where we can begin to push these advocacy initiatives. And I think as professionals, if you're a lawyer in this space, it's not just about trying to know what the law says, but actually trying to innovate and be a voice even in your own sector. So the chamber, if you're in the chamber of commerce, if you're in your bar association, if you are dealing with a technologically driven space, it's important for you as professionals or as even founders to push for those things to become a topic that a lot of governments should begin to pay attention to. That's my opinion. I don't know about you, Jasper. What do you think when it comes to pushing for advocacy in these areas that are yet to be understood by the government, such as AI?
Yeah, certainly. I think from my experience, regulators, when they don't really understand something, they tend to squash it or try to kill it before it lays eggs or something of the sort, if you may say so. So actually, I'd say that startup founders and maybe lawyers within the ecosystem, you should try and advocate for maybe new laws or make proposals to the regulators, to lawmakers within the vicinity, and something of the sort. We also do this through there's various ways in which we advocate for laws in Kenya. We have groups like we have Sharia Online, which I'm a member of. We have Lawyers Hub, which has also been instrumental in making proposals for new regulations for startups and similar things of the sort. And yes, I believe that those are some excellent avenues to advocate for. And I think that for startup founders, I think nobody will advocate for you. It's for you guys to actually maybe meet up and make proposals such that you'll have proper regulation of your sector rather than people imposing regulations that you have no need for.
Exactly. Thank you, Jasper. So we're about to taper down to the end of this. So please, if you still have questions, keep it coming. So we're going to end this session with best practices. We'd like you to help us, help the startup founder here who is like, wow, I never knew about this. Now I know. Where do I start from? From policies to control steps to contracts. Please be as specific as possible. Where do we start from? What are some of the things that you look out for to begin to, indoctrinate best practices as startup founders when you're dealing with data, dealing with cybersecurity and cyber-related issues? Where do we start from, really? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please be as, open and as specific as possible. And then please, if you have comments, if you have questions, please put them in the comment section. And then, we'll round up to close. Thank you, Jasper.
Oh, wonderful. We're running out of time, so I'd please ask you guys to bear with me. And actually, I'd say that this is the meat and potatoes for this entire webinar. So I've been wearing two hats. I think here I'll be wearing more of the lawyer hat. Now, the best practices. The best practices, we can look at them in three different ways. Then there's practical aspects or the security controls that you may implement for your startup or your organization. And then there's the third part, which I'd really like to focus on. It involves cloud contracts. So about the policies. For startup founders, you should put in place policies such as executive management. You should put in place policies that provide guidance for all the activities. For instance, you should have a cybersecurity policy in place, which captures things like the incident response, business continuity in case of a breach or an incident. And then you should also have these other policies that cover things like the safeguarding of data, the breach notifications. Then you should also have other guidelines for the organization, such as access control and training of employees. For instance, you should be having regular training for your employees with the advancing technology and things like that. Now, the security controls. Sorry, my throat is drying up. You guys will have to forgive me. When it comes to security controls, there's things like the network security, password management. I'd really like to invite you guys to focus on password management. For instance, the founders in the webinar currently, you can check whether your data has been leaked or something of the sort. There's some websites. There's a certain website that we usually use. There's a website called Have I Been Pwned? And then this usually checked, Have I Been Pwned? It's HAVE, have I been, BNNPWNED, have I been pwned? Basically, it checks if your email has been leaked and whether your data has been breached or whether any of your data or your details were involved in a cyber attack. And equally, you can check the password management feature on your Chrome browser or other Chrome-related browsers such as Brave or the Microsoft Edge or things like that. Then there's email security, cloud security, employee training, as we mentioned earlier, and then you also need to implement multi-factor authentication. Now, when it comes to the security controls, an easy way of really doing things is, as startups, your stack is usually based on the cloud. All your technology and your services are operating through the cloud. And rather than building your security program from scratch, it's usually easier to just use a managed software as a service provider such as Google, for instance. Let's say you want to run your own email server. Rather than building your own email servers from scratch, that can create some serious cybersecurity challenges going down the road. It's easier to use maybe a managed service like Google's Gmail service because it's better configured out of the box. Unless you have the specific skill set, it's usually easier to just use a managed service. Now, here's the section I really wanted to focus on. It focuses on cloud contracts. And if there's anything else that you would get out of this webinar, I'd just like to ask you to make sure you review your cloud contracts, because that is where a lot of headaches for lawyers usually come in. So I'd actually try to encourage you guys to read your contracts and especially the disclaimers, because there's some clauses such as the availability and responsibility in case of breaches, and this can create some problems in future. And now these clauses, there are different types of clauses. I think I can capture them in a few minutes. There is the data policy clauses, which capture things like the data residency or where the data will be stored. This one is usually important for startups like in finance or healthcare, or maybe some areas handling sensitive data. And in some regulations, they usually require you to store your data locally. I'm not sure about the Nigerian data protection laws, but like in Kenya, the Kenyan laws require us to have a localized version of the data. Now, there's concern like the residency localization, as I've mentioned, the storage, the disposal and migration. And this creates some problems in some instances. For instance, some markets or some jurisdictions may have law protections, and that might create some problems with your contractual partners or things like that. And however, despite storing the data maybe in maybe several jurisdictions, you can also implement controls that they make the data unintelligible, such that as much as you have the data there, it's encrypted and cannot be easily accessed in the event of a breach or something of the sort. Now, the things we call the service level agreements that startups usually sign with other providers. And now you should ensure that these agreements, they include clauses that involve covering urgent security alerts or patches. Let's say maybe there's a new hack that has been maybe discovered or something like that, or maybe there's a breach and they know that this is a risk for your particular organization. So if you actually, when you have this clause within the agreement, it actually protects you by ensuring that your provider actually informs you that there's a particular risk and they actually engage in activities that protect you from this risk. It also serves as a sort of insurance policy in case of indemnity or liability or something of the sort in future. Now, another thing is notice of change of services. Sometimes your service provider, your cloud provider, may be changing the scope of service. Maybe if it's hosting, they may be changing the memory available, the amount of storage, or maybe the number of locations available for your cached services or something like that. Now, you should ensure that your contracts they capture that there is a notice of change of services or there are change management policies. that ensure that your data will be, your data integrity and availability will be assured, irrespective of whether there's a change in the services or there's an upgrade or something of the sort that is going on. Now, another one, and this one is usually it's usually really problematic when it comes to negotiating it as part of a contract. And this is the graduated audit rights. And this is really important. The audit rights are really important in case maybe there's a breach and you need to investigate, and then you need to maybe apportion liability in the event that there is a claim from maybe from the users or the regulators about to fine you, and you need to show that maybe I am not particularly responsible for it, and maybe you can share responsibility with this one or two or three other guys. Now you can negotiate for graduated audit rights, which are basically they increase depending on maybe the scope of the breach or something like that, or the severity of the incident. Then, when I'm just winding down, you should also negotiate and draft agreements with your contractors or employees. For startups, especially maybe let's say you're bootstrapped or something, it usually starts from maybe a relationship with the guys that you have around you, and you don't really put things on paper. And that usually ends up creating some serious headaches down the road. So ideally, you should negotiate some written contracts with your contractors, employees, or other people that you work with. And you should be very careful to ensure that there's clauses such as non-disclosure, there's audit rights, and maybe the apportionment of liability. And finally, as I close this off, I'd please ask you to treat your employees and your contractors well, because there's some very interesting scenarios that arise from maybe those, I don't know, maybe some hint of disagreement, or maybe the relationship broke down or something of the sort. And now what we've actually seen, or maybe in some other embarrassing incident that I've handled before, and other maybe incidents that I've seen, especially in Kenya, you find that the employee contractor they back now, when they were still working with you. So what happens is you didn't pay them, or maybe there was some discontent or something, some frustration between the two of you or the number of the parties. And what happens is that they'll end up maybe posting some embarrassing or upsetting content and links in retribution. And from there, you end up maybe losing clients or things like that because of the breach. So yeah, thank you for having me.
For sharing. Actually, you're still here, you're not leaving us yet. But yeah, these are very interesting points that you've noted. And for everyone on this call, we definitely cannot talk about everything today. But this is a very good introduction to some of the things you need to be aware of. There's just so much that happens in the startup ecosystem that you really need to understand that it's beyond the products or just beyond having a beautiful team. What makes a business successful is being able to look at all these aspects and have things in place for them. So some of the points that Jasper has shared are things that are very critical to ensure that you are having these things. Negotiate and look at the contract you're signing with your cloud service providers, your internet service providers, your staff, the intellectual property of what you're building, right? You have a lot of people, like you mentioned, are bootstrapping, and they try to outsource the development of their software because maybe they don't have the money, so they're offering maybe shares or options. In those contracts, who owns the product? Who owns it? Do you have an NDA that says you shouldn't share some of these things that you are building for us with others? How specific? There are some I have reviewed a lot of agreements on this, and it's so interesting that some contracts don't even state who the owner of what is being built belongs to. The person who is building the app or building the software and everything, there's nothing that particularly states that he's just building it, but it belongs to the company. So as legal practitioners, you really need to understand the dynamics of this and ensure that your client is protected. And if you're the startup founder, look at this and ensure that you are looking and paying attention. And please, you can't do everything. And I think I'll round off here is get a professional who has competence in this field to walk you through and make your journey easier. I know a lot of startup founders will say, "Oh, lawyers are expensive." Oh, you would always have what can work for you. So always ensure that you are getting the right advice, you are updated with the industry trends, you know exactly what to expect in your industry, so that you are not making unnecessary mistakes. One of the things I always tell startup founders is that legal compliance is not an expense, it's an investment. Think of it the
Yeah,
same way
certainly.
you invest in your products, in your software, in your app. Is the same way you should invest in compliance, because it saves you a whole lot. There are companies that have been destroyed because they have not complied, and they've been several years in building. So you do not want to build a tower and realize that it just takes one brick to pull that tower and it crumbles. So it's very important to know this, and it's the mindset change and the mindset shift that is really important for us as we do this series. So the essence is, you are updated and you do the right thing. Those are my final words. Jasper, what will be your final words to the audience? Even as opened our minds. You can always reach out to Jasper, of course. I'm sure he will not bill you, he won't charge you too much. I'm hoping so, right? So if they want to reach out to you, they can always do so. So what will be your final thoughts to the audience? I don't know, I don't see any questions, but thank you. I think Henry asked a question and I think Joel answered that. I think he wanted to confirm the site to be able to check if you have been hacked or something. Have I been
Yeah,
porn.com? Can you spell it again? Um, for those that maybe did, just to confirm.
yeah. I think Joel has posted it from the comments accurately. Have I
Okay,
been
that's
pwned.com?
correct, right?
Yes.
All right,
Yeah. So
fantastic. So
lastly, I
yes, your
think
final thoughts before we round up. Yeah.
yeah, lastly, in case you need any clarification or any other further details regarding what I talked about today, or any other query you may have, feel free to reach out to me. I think my LinkedIn profile is put there. And as usual, this does not constitute legal advice. If you need, you should hire a lawyer who will advise you on your specific needs and circumstances. Thank you.
The almighty disclaimer, of course. I think it's even important to say this, that this is a conversation and it's something that we think is important for everyone to have. So thank you very much, everyone, for just really being here. Thank you, Jasper. I must say that it's been an incredible session with you. Thank you for lending to us your expertise and sharing with us your thoughts, on this. And it's very interesting and wonderful work you're doing. I want to sincerely thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing your wealth of wisdom and insight with us. We're definitely going to meet again. Who knows? I may be visiting Kenya very soon, and you may be coming over down to Nigeria. So it'll be very interesting to connect with you and take a very interesting picture or two, right? So thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for those that have stayed here. This is an hour, 10 minutes. So we really, really thank you. Have a very pleasant evening, everyone. And for those, if you are joining and you're watching the replay, please know that it's live on LinkedIn. It's also live on YouTube. So you can always go back and catch any points that you think you may have missed. And you can always reach out to me if you have any questions or any clarifications. So I want to wish us all a very pleasant evening. Have a very good night and do take care of yourself. Thank you, Jasper, for being here. My regards to everyone and your people in Kenya. Looking forward to seeing you within the shortest possible time, and have a very good evening. Bye.
Right, bye. Cheers.
All right. So thank you everyone for being part of this series. Very exciting time. Looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Please put your reminders. We're going to be having a very, very interesting topic. So be on the lookout for this announcement. Have a very good night and bye for now.